Welcome to Transformational Journeys, a BQN podcast about embracing authenticity and diving deep into the messy, beautiful process of personal growth. I'm your host, Lex Rosa. In each episode, we'll step away from the noise of societal expectations. We'll hear stories of individuals who've dared to chart their own unique paths, people who have faced adversity, who've questioned convention, and found strength in vulnerability. We're not just talking about transformation. We're sharing real, unfiltered stories that come with self-discovery. Join us as we celebrate the power of courage, the beauty of imperfection, and the freedom that comes from living authentically.
Everybody makes up an image of themselves in their head, but that image is rarely who you really are. Who you really are is how you interact with the world. Your actions are what matters, not your thoughts, not who you think you are inside. Being authentic to yourself is being able to accept who you are outside and change your view inside to match that. You can't change things that you can't accept. You can't work on things if you refuse to acknowledge that there's something to work on to begin with.
Yep.
So you need to know where you are in order to progress further on. Things that have real value are things that, if you were on your deathbed, you would regret not having more of. That's real value. Think about if the doctor said, hey, tomorrow you're dead. What were the things that you would have thought that you should have done more of? You know, the people who you should have spent more time with. Those are the things that hold the most value to you.
Today, I am excited to have Odysseus Michael, also known as Odie, on the show with us today. Why don't you say hi to everyone, Odie?
Howdy.
Awesome. Hey, Odie. So Odie is a self-described country boy from a small town in a rural Rocky Mountain town. He survived a childhood of abuse and has had his share of dark moments as an adult. He traveled the world on a journey to find himself, and he now dedicates a large portion of his life to mentoring young men who face similar struggles to his own. And so again, thank you, Odie, for joining us today. And one thing, I'm super excited to hear about your journey, and I'm sure the audience is super excited as well. One thing I'd love to ask before we jump in is, like, on a scale of 1 to 10, just so we get a sense of, like, how much do you feel yourself today?
How much do I feel myself today? That's an interesting question. On a scale of 1 to 10, like,
Yeah.
I don't know, like we'll say an 8. Like, I'm not normally doing tech stuff,
Yeah.
so we'll say an 8 minus this contraption on me. So
there we go. Actually, that's great. I think that says a little bit about yourself. You're not much of a tech guy.
No, which is kind of ironic considering, like, my history in making video games and stuff, but it is what it is.
Yeah, you like to make video games. It doesn't mean that you're good at the machines that play them, right?
Right.
Awesome. Well, I want to just dive right in. One of the things that we really look at in this podcast is how people live authentically. What does that mean to you to live authentically?
So the way that I look at things is everybody makes up an image of themselves in their head, but that image is rarely who you really are. Who you really are is how you interact with the world. Your actions are what matters, not your thoughts, not who you think you are inside. So I think that being authentic to yourself is being able to accept who you are outside and change your view inside to match that. Because a lot of times, people who are very good people in their day-to-day lives go home thinking that they're horrible people because maybe they had a bad thought. And, our society has kind of made this whole thing around guilt, especially around, like, thoughts for some reason. And there's nothing that you can really do about thoughts. Thoughts occur. Thoughts are a natural, like, thing that comes up, and because your brain and your consciousness is made up of, like, 1,000 different little systems. They're all just like blah 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 blah. So you don't really have that much control over what you think. And it's, so we make up these ideas of ourselves as these horrible, horrible people. Not always, but usually that's how it goes. And what's really going on is that you've never really done anything that horrible in your entire life. So you're not that horrible person because nobody's ever witnessed this horror. It's just in your head. And when something's pretty much just in your head, it means it's not real.
Yeah, and even if you did something horrible in your life, it doesn't define you, right?
Right. Yeah. When you do something that's bad, a single action doesn't define you. Your worth and your true self is like words. Words are hard. When things are added together.
Combined.
Yeah, we'll say combined. The combination of all of your, actions and things that you do, the way that you treat other people. It's like if you think, some people are like, I'm a hilarious person. I'm a natural comedian, but nobody's ever laughed at your jokes. You're not funny. Sorry, but that's just where it is. Like, so.
Yeah. And I mean, maybe you are to yourself and
maybe you can learn to be.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. If you want to be.
Maybe you're funny to yourself, but maybe you're not funny to others.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And that's an important distinction. I love that you talked about acceptance. And I think, that's something that we'll talk about later in the conversation, but I think it's like a really big piece of being able to transform oneself, right? Is first being able to accept who you are. Is that
yes,
true
definitely. Yeah, definitely. If you can't accept, you can't change things that you can't accept. You can't work on things if you refuse to acknowledge that there's something to work on to begin with.
Yep.
So you need to know where you are in order to progress further on.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like you've thought deeply about all of this. And I think that a lot of this thinking that you have has probably led you to where you are today. What was that sort of, there's probably not one pivotal moment, but was there one pivotal moment where you want to share with us that kind of led you here, that maybe even kind of reflects this thinking around self-acceptance and then leading to transformation?
Let's see. One specific spot? Not particularly. It's been a long and slow climb. I wouldn't say that there's been a single thing that's happened that could be like, oh yeah, it was definitely like from here to here I started to feel different, because it has been just an up and a down and an up and a down and an up and a down and just, back and forth, because that's how everything is. Like, if you have a problem in your life and you struggle with it, you get better at handling it, but that problem never fully goes away. Even like when it's no longer affecting you, it's still there, just sitting back there. Mm-hmm. But what's happened is you've gotten better at dealing with it. You've gotten better at telling it to shut up, or whatever you need to do to work past it. Yeah. So, yeah, I would not be able to pinpoint a single event because it's been such a rocky, long journey. So.
Yeah, and that journey has led you to a point now where you are mentoring young men who have had similar struggles to your own. What kind of led you to that moment of saying, hey, I want to actually help others who have gone through what I've gone through?
Well, so like going through the struggles and stuff like that, I was trying to figure out, like at one point I was I became to be able to see myself better, like over time, the fog lifted and I could kind of see myself. And I was like, why am I this way? What happened to me to make me this way? What affected me in such a manner in my youth that this is what I grew into? And what it turns out to be is a lack of positive male role model. Mm. And that's, for me, I don't know if that's everybody's, but it seems to be something, in my opinion, that's lacking in our current society. And so, like in my case, My dad was, an unstable person. Um, and how that ended up was me leaving home at 16 and, going out into the world. And I never really had an uncle that I could look up to or any sort of male mentor. So I lived that way without that. And over time, I became something that just was not conducive to helping my own self, let alone other people. But when I kind of figured that out, I kind of realized that even though I never had that, there's no reason why I can't be that for somebody else. And in doing that for these younger guys, I've healed a lot of that thing that I was lacking by giving it to somebody else.
Yeah, actually, that's a great segue, into the next part of this, which is about connection, right? And I think that connection is a big part of living authentically. So how is it how has connection with others, and maybe it's more of a deep dive in what you were just talking about, but how has your connection with others helped you become better at connecting with yourself and becoming more authentically yourself?
Well, as I kind of mentioned at the beginning, other people are reflections of yourself. They see you, they see your actions and your words, and they can tell you better who you are than your brain can, because, like I said, your brain, it makes up crap. It guilts you for things that don't even really matter. But these people that are around you, the people that you keep in your circle, those are the ones who really know who you are. And so these connections, one of the things that I tell these young guys I mentor is that they need to keep their circle small and sturdy. So you are building when you're, interacting with people, you're building a foundation. And the people that are closest to you are the ones who hold you up. Because no man is an island. No man holds themselves up. And believe me, I have gone through a lot of burning bridges when I shouldn't have. There have been a lot of things retrospectively where I've realized that I had the things that I needed in my life, but instead I burned them because I thought I could do better on my own or do better somewhere else. And the bottom line is that all relationships and interactions take effort. And if you don't put in the effort, they crumble. So, and also if you abandon them, they crumble. There's a whole bunch of things that go on that can happen. But if you nurture those connections, they become stronger. And the stronger your connections are with your foundation, the faster and better and stronger you can grow.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, like you said, you need that support structure around you. And is there also an element for you about connecting with yourself and, being that support for yourself when you don't have that support around you?
Yeah, so a lot of times, like I said, your brain is often your worst enemy. It's got, there's that voice in your head. So, evolutionarily speaking, when we were cave people, we'd be wandering through the woods and there'd be a clearing. And then over on the other side of the clearing, there'd be a blueberry bush. And you're like, oh yeah, I want those blueberries. But then this part of your brain would be like, there might be a saber-toothed tiger in those bushes. So don't rush out there. So that part of our brain is always trying to keep us safe. Except now there's no saber-toothed tiger. Now there's public speaking, new boyfriend, new girlfriend, job interviews. There's these small things, but your brain doesn't understand that these are minor, and it still goes balls to the walls about don't do it, don't do it. It's scary. So it's what you learn to do, or at least what I've learned to do, is I've learned to tell it to shut up. Because that's kind of what you have to do. So there's that voice. There's also the one that brings up crap that you used to do to try and guilt you and make you feel shame for something that you did as a child. Okay. This is another one that I really struggle with. And like I said before, these problems, they never fully go away, but you just get better at handling them. So this other voice also, I've learned tell to shut up, essentially. But also what you can do with the voice who tries to shame you for things that you did in your past, you can provide evidence to the contrary. You can say, like, things that have happened to me, it'd be like, oh, well, you should be ashamed that this ever happened. I was like, look, the place that I was at that time in my life, I was doing my best. That was the best that I could do. And you just got to be able to, argue that.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think, like you were saying before, it's that voice is acting like you're being threatened by a saber-toothed tiger, or that, it's trying to protect you from things that you might have done in the past. And how do you get to the point where you're not allowing those voices that are so loud that are saying, oh, why did you do this? Or those self-deprecating voices, how do you connect with the side of yourself that is more compassionate and more understanding?
Well, I think that the first step is you always have to catch it, because we think most of the time that voice is us. And that's not what it is. It's, like I said, it's a system in your brain that's trying to protect you or trying to show you lessons. That's the guilt one. The shame one is trying to teach you a lesson. So, and those are important parts of our brain. They are. They've done a lot for us over like the course of our evolution, and like they still do a lot for us like in the course of our day-to-day lives, but they do get out of hand. So, after all that, I forgot your question.
Yeah, so it's about, no worries. It's about how you connect with, like you said, you made a really good point, right? Which is that voice that's shaming you and that's acting like there's a saber-toothed tiger around the corner when there isn't. We tend to think that's us, and it is part of us, right? It's like, but it's like maybe 10% of us, right? There's this other 90% that is like unconscious that you have to tap into to be able to connect fully with yourself. And so I think my question is like, how do you tap into that other 90%, right? Because that 10% is so loud, right? It has to be, right?
And that's
it has
where
to protect you from the saber-toothed tiger.
Right. Okay, so yeah, thank you for reminding me where we're going with this. Anyway, so so when all of these things come up, the very first thing that you need to be able to do, the very beginning step, is to be able to catch it. And that's really hard because, like I said, we always think that these things are us, so we let it run away with us. And the next thing we know, we're like down on ourselves and we've been pissed off at ourselves for like over an hour or maybe even days. And like, it's all about something that isn't even real. It's just in your head. And so when these things first come up, or as soon as you can, you need to notice that it's happening. And once you notice that it's happening, you're going to realize something. And this is like the biggest key, is that you're going to realize that that voice is not you. That you are separate from that your other parts of your brain, your logical thinking side, your problem solving, like all of these things that make up the rest of your consciousness are not a part of that. So when you do that, that's when you can say to yourself, okay, to this day, this is an example, to this day, if I see somebody whom I'm attracted to, in my head, because of what my father said to me as a child, I hear his voice and he says, no one will ever love you. Why are you even bothering? Okay? So, now that was a guiding factor in a long period of my life where I just assumed that was the case, so I would sabotage everything. And anyway, long story short, but now that still happens. Like I said, your problems never fully go away. But now when it happens, it's quieter. And when it happens, I say, prove it. I say, look at all these other times where people loved me. One of my main things is I'm like, hey, look, I've got 2 dogs. So there you go. I've got unconditional love from 2 sources. So,
Yeah, that's awesome. I like that approach. I think for me a lot lately, it's been like trying to be compassionate with that side of myself. I never thought about it as like giving it, disconfirming evidence. And that's a really cool approach.
Yeah, I think that the compassion thing works. It also it's some people struggle with being compassionate to themselves. So if that's
Mhm.
something that you struggle with, then you can start out with this. Does that make
Ah,
sense?
yeah.
Yeah. So as far as the compassion thing, at least for me, the compassion part came later.
Mm,
So first I started out with telling it to shut up.
yeah.
Then I moved to providing contrary evidence.
Hmm.
And then I started to be able to learn to be compassionate with myself. And being compassionate with the self is really difficult depending on your upbringing because I don't know. The funny thing is that the things that your parents say and do, like they're all in you. Everything is in you, and you don't even know that it's in you until you're about 25, and that's when everything starts to crystallize. And suddenly you look around, you're like, "Holy hell, what the hell happened to me?"
Hmm.
Because you suddenly can't your brain is starting to settle. And when your brain's starting to settle, like all of the pieces, all of the experiences in your life start to come down and merge together. And you have this opportunity when you're in your early 20s to fix that. I didn't
Hmm.
fix that until way, way, way later. And you know what?
Hmm.
That happens too, and that's okay. But
Hmm.
with these young guys, most of them are now in their, I guess all of them, even the youngest one is now 20. Anyway, so he's coming up on these, the youngest one is coming up on these times where he's going to be, having all of these things. And he's had not exactly the same, but a similar problems to what I've had, like I said. So these little issues, he's already starting to notice. He's like, oh, well, I just was, for some reason, I couldn't like shake this because something that my dad said to me is just keeps popping up into my head. And I'm like, yeah, that's how this happens. So you have an opportunity to face it now. If you don't face it now, you're going to end up, you know, completely, it's just going to ingrain itself and then it's going to be harder to dig out.
Hmm. Yeah,
So,
it'll start to run. It'll start to run you,
yeah,
right?
yeah, and it certainly has. So,
Yeah, I mean, I really love that the story you just shared with me about how you went from um, learning to, well, first those things were running you, right?
yes.
And then you went from them running you to let me give them disconfirming evidence, like, oh, fuck you, I've got unconditional love and all of that, and I have
Yeah.
proof of it. To then becoming self-compassionate, which is its own journey now, where you're probably at right where you are right now, and it's probably its own journey for you and
Hmm.
for a lot of us. And that is what I love about that is like that's the real journey. I think that that I want people to be thinking about because I think a lot of people focus on the journey of like, oh, I went to school, I went to college, I got a career, I got married. Like to them,
Hmm.
that's the journey to finding happiness in life.
Right.
But it sounds like, maybe that's not necessarily the case.
I mean, I imagine that, we've gone through a lot of things like the way that our society is built up. We have like this, you know, I think that at some point you've called it like the relationship escalator or the life
Mhm.
escalator, in which,
Yep.
you know, you go to school, you go to college, you get a job, you get married, you pop out kids. And I think that the cool thing about the current generation is that they've highly rejected that. And which, a lot of them are living at home in their like mid to late 20s, which is a little weird for, you and I who are a lot older and like came from a different, different generation, but they're still already rejecting that. And I think that that's not going to, so I don't think that's going to be the biggest issue for the current generation. I think that
Mhm.
their biggest issues, because they're staying longer with their parents, is going to be, what their folks say to them and, other things that happen to them in school.
Mhm.
Like, I guess bullying's not a big thing anymore. Like, anyway, the
Mhm.
world's changed so much, but
Yeah.
those sorts of things, like not, having to try and figure out jobs and, especially in the economy and,
Yeah, well, it's interesting you talk about how the new generation is in a completely different context than you were in growing up.
mhm.
Has connecting with that younger generation helped you on your journey in terms of processing and further connecting with yourself and moving forward in your own journey?
Well, yeah, it definitely has. It definitely has. It's shown me a few things. It's shown me that like not a lot. Like so, society changes, but people don't. So these young people, they all say the same things that like we used to say. I mean, they've got different words for it. They've got like all the new slang and you know, they've got TikTok and things like that, which are like, I obviously didn't have as a kid. I'm sure you can definitely relate. But like,
Actually, for the audience, do you want to share? Like, you grew up in the '80s, right?
yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Just so the audience, because it may not be obvious from looking at you.
yes, yeah,
So just want to make sure that's clear for the audience. Yeah.
yeah. I'm old as hell. Thank you.
Don't
So
worry.
anyway,
So am I.
yeah. Um. So I think that also means that the younger kids will come out better because like what happened. And we can start queuing up them pictures.
Yeah.
What happened with me was I had no guidance. I had no role models. I had no idea where the hell I was supposed to go, what I was supposed to do. And I remember I had this conversation with my mother, and this ties into exactly what we were just talking about. I said, I had gotten a very good job at a hospital. I was working, I was making good money. I had, pretty cheap rent in my little crappy basement apartment. And I called my mom after, a while of working at that job. And I said, well, now what? She goes, well, now you buy a car. And I said, well, then what? She goes, well, then you get married. And I was like, and then she goes, and I said, okay. And then she's like, and then you have kids. And I said, is that going to make me happy? And she said, and I'll never forget this. You're not supposed to be happy.
Ouch.
And that was really interesting. Not like at the time, it really hurt, right? I was like, oh, like she means that for me. But that's not actually what she meant. And like, far be it for me to like give my mother credit in a way, but like, even if she didn't mean it this way, the way that I kind of understand it now is that happiness is retrospective. Doing things, you're never going to be permanently happy. Yeah. There's no such thing as permanent happiness. So, me being me at the time, I dropped everything. I went to Guatemala, which, dumb idea.
As one does.
As one does, yes. That was my first, taste of like the outside world. Came back, worked at a warehouse, then went to Belize, which is next to Guatemala, so I'm not really branching out there. But then, anyway, I always want to say how old I was. I have no idea how old I was. 20-something. Okay? I went to Japan. I settled all my affairs in the United States, and I said, all right, screw it, I'm going. And I moved to Japan with $700 and nothing else. Just a backpack. And it was probably the dumbest thing I've ever done in my entire life. But, things only happen the way they ever could. So, I was there and I had to deal with it. I got arrested for terrorism. That was excellent. Not because I did anything. I actually
have a picture of you in Japan, right?
Yes, you do have a picture of me in Japan. That's from the Hinamatsuri, which is like a doll festival. Well, that's like zoomed way the hell in.
Well,
yeah.
How's that?
There
That's
we go.
better.
Yeah, we can see what's going on. Yeah.
There we go. We like a good close up.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway,
look at how young you are there.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. So what is this happening? What's happening here?
This is a Hinamatsuri. The Hinamatsuri. So this setup in front is called kaiseki. Kaiseki is just like, it's like a traditional dinner. So there's all these little dishes. Each one of these is its own little dish, and it has different things in it. Like this one up in front, with the little like silver dish, that's like a soup, and there's a candle underneath that keeps it hot. The little red cup has sake in it. Anyway, there's like a whole bunch of stuff. And like that was a good experience. That was when I was in Kumamoto, Japan. And that's where I started to learn Japanese. And I mean, you can kind of tell by my eyes in this picture. I am actually half Japanese, but like I didn't speak it because my mom never spoke it.
Mm-hmm.
So, anyway, I started to learn Japanese there, and it was really hard. You know, this is a real statement, so don't hashtag cancel me, but the Japanese people do not like foreigners. They don't.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that they like less than foreigners is half people.
Mm.
They do not like if you're half Japanese and half, anything else. I don't know why. I mean, I do know why. I can get into the whole like cultural reasoning and all that other stuff. But the bottom line is that, it was a very bad experience overall. However, also nobody speaks English outside of like Tokyo and the main tourist areas. Right. So in Kumamoto, nobody spoke English. So what happened was I learned Japanese extremely quickly. It took me about a year to learn Japanese fluently, to speak it. It took me about 4 years to be able to read and write it because, it's a lot of stuff to read and write. But it was, even though it was a bad experience overall, like a painful, hard, and shitty experience overall, it also was, it started to show me who I was. It started to show me what a stubborn, like, just, I don't give a flying fuck what you say about me. I'm gonna, like, I'm not gonna just back down. Like, it showed me the sort of person that I was. And that was kind of interesting because I had never really seen that. I had always been under the impression, also, that I was a quitter or a coward, especially because, parents say things. But, like, also because, like, I had done a lot of, running away in my life. Mm-hmm. But when I was faced with this, in this situation, I ended up getting a job in Japan. I ended up having an apartment. I ended up doing a lot of things. And eventually I ended up leaving mainland Japan and going to Okinawa, where things were eventually better. At first, they got worse. Like I said, this has been an up and down, like a very serious up and down journey. Mm-hmm. When I first ended up in Okinawa, I was working on a farm, a rice farm, and on this island called Tokashikijima. And it was such a... There were 75 people on that island, and then me. So, again, like, I'm making poor decisions, okay? So, but, and they didn't like me at all. I ended up breaking a leg, and like there was this whole thing. But when I left there, I ended up in Naha, which is on the main island of Okinawa, and I remember I walked into this hostel looking for a place to stay, and, I'm talking to the guy, I'm saying, hey, I need a room and stuff, and the entire time, he's just smiling at me. And, like, culturally speaking, Japanese people do not do a lot of smiling. Mm-hmm. So I was just like, after a little while, I was just like, okay, what? Why are you smiling at me? Because I had it with everybody. And he goes, do you want a job? Because he had never met somebody who looks like me being able to speak Japanese like a normal Japanese person. Yeah. And he thought it was the most amazing thing ever. And he himself had traveled the world. He had gone to Australia and done all this other stuff. He was a surfer, and that turned out to be some of the most positive times in my life. However, because of how I was inside, I wasn't able to appreciate it. Yeah. In fact, I'm only able to appreciate it now, really. It took a long time for me to be able to retrospectively appreciate things. And this is what I'm talking about, where I say that happiness is retrospective. Like, you enjoy things in the moment. That's joy, right? Mm-hmm. But the things that make you happy are the things that you remember. And a lot of times it's bittersweet. A lot of times you think to yourself, like, oh, like, it sucks that I don't have that time. But you also have to understand that at least you had that time. Because sometimes, there's big swatches of time where you don't have stuff like that. So you need to be able to, when you're looking back at your life, it's important to pull up the good things and not just the bad things. Mm-hmm. Now, again, I couldn't really appreciate that. So I burned that bridge after a few years. I went to Taipei thinking that I was going to have a better job and make more money. I was not. I was not paid as agreed upon, and I ended up homeless, and I lived as, a low-level criminal for a while. It was not a good time. But, what eventually happened there was that I ended up, this is the next picture. Yeah, you want to switch to the next picture? Sorry.
Yes.
We're going on the journey through a part of my life. So.
No, that's great. Here we go. This is my favorite one.
So there's me down in the middle front, very different from the other picture that you're seeing.
That's a physical transformation right
there. My hair is different. Everything's different. Like, I'm a lot paler. Like, anyway, this is Thailand. I ended up in Thailand. I went through, let's see, after Taiwan, I went to, where'd I go? Okay, don't quote me on the chronology of all of this. But
I don't know. I might hold you to it.
I went to Malaysia. I went to Borneo, which is like a part of like one of the more wild parts of Malaysia, and it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed that. I went to now, if you want to know how I managed to afford to go to those places after me just saying that I was homeless and a low-level criminal, was that I was a low-level criminal. So, the money to do this came from that. Anyway.
You were surviving.
I was doing what I had to do to survive, and believe me, there's a lot, like I talked about earlier with the guilt thing and the shame, like that comes up a lot in my head. And every time I say, hey, that's what I needed to do to eat.
Yeah.
So
I think it's hard for people to understand that unless they've actually, I haven't been there, you know.
It's true. You never know exactly what you're capable of and what you'll do to survive until you're faced with it. And that's fine. And I've been judged a lot for the things I've done. And I get it. Like, it's hard to understand. It's hard to see. It's what I had to do, and it's what I did, and it's done now, and I'm not doing it anymore, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So anyway, I went to Borneo, I went to Singapore, Malaysia, the Philippines. Yeah, those are the main ones I went to. Anyway, but I spent 3 months in Thailand, and this here is Suat Gym in Thailand. Suat Gym is also kind of like an orphanage, so as you see these young guys up at the top in the back, those two young guys, they were orphans. In fact, the guys next to them, they were also orphans. In fact, almost every single person in this photo, other than me and the other foreigners, you can see there's like 3 or 4 foreigners in there, were orphans at one point in time that were taken in by this gym. So I guess, and that's like a very common thing, is then they just live there. And they learn Muay Thai, and they do all these fights. And they were, after having, a lot of rocky crap and, meeting some of the shittiest people that I had encountered, these people here were the nicest people that I had encountered probably in my entire life up to that point. And it was so weird and interesting to me because I was just and there's language barriers and stuff. Like, some of them speak English. Like this guy up at the top left, his name is Bang. Bang speaks good English. On the top right, that's Mai. Mai was my teacher. He speaks pretty good English too. But Mai is funny because they would say that if it wasn't for my nose, I could be Thai. But because I've got the European nose, I can't be Thai. It's pretty funny. But anyway, they were very nice guys, and I learned little bits of Thai from some of them. Penda is not in this photo. That's too bad. There was a guy, his name is Pendaw. He was so quiet. He never spoke to anybody. And, he was one of the younger guys. And I would sit down and like eat my food, and he would sit down with me and eat his food. And we'd barely speak, but then he'd point to something and say the Thai word for it. And then I'd repeat it. And like the only one that I can really remember off the top of my head is gangkok, which is like a gecko. Because they were everywhere.
Of course you'd remember that.
Of course I would. What else would I? Yeah. So anyway, these people they showed me the other side of things, and they were so nice and caring. They would share their food with me. And I mean, like I said, these are orphans. Okay. They would make sure that I was like included in whatever it was they were doing, even if I couldn't understand it. They were so like welcoming and nice. And it was really hard for me to accept because of everything that happened prior to that. And like I said, this is a second time. So the first time was in Okinawa, where I had the nice things and people were very nice to me at the hostel in that job for several years, and I couldn't appreciate it. This also, I couldn't appreciate this until later. Now, what happened was, when I first get there, everything's fine and good, right? But then over time, not because anything's bad has changed, not because anything's changed about my situation, not because anything bad is happening, but because the brain starts to kick in. The brain says, you don't deserve this. You don't deserve their kindness. You don't deserve to be here. Like, think of the things that you've done. Do you know what I mean? So on and so forth. And what happens is if you let it, it wins. And I didn't know what I was doing. Like I said, I had no guidance whatsoever. So it won. And I left there too. Anyway, like, those are the main things. I ended up in Australia where things went a lot better for me and overall. But, and I ended up coming back to the States in a broken state because, like I said, everything is up and down. Everything is up and down. And, yeah, it was exhausting. In fact, I'm exhausted just talking about it.
Yeah, no, thank you. Actually, thank you so much for sharing that story, because I think you were saying that, like, when you started that story, it was about, I had asked you a question about how, connecting with yourself and connecting with others and all of these things help you, connect with your authentic self, and how your experiences shape you and how they help you learn who you are, right? And I think what's so amazing about your story is unintentionally, you took yourself to some really challenging situations, and unfortunately, like you said, in the moment, it was probably brutal and definitely was brutal, right? And you had to survive. You were in survival mode and you did things you regretted, but you also had these moments that you look back on and they make you so happy. But then you were saying that you had so much trouble accepting that. And I think some people kind of refer to this as like self-sabotage, right? Where we have something going good for ourselves and, we somehow find a way to sabotage it. Do you think that, you're still doing that, or do you think that you've come out of that?
I think that at this point, again, I'm not necessarily in those sorts of situations, but at this point, I feel like I'm doing a lot better. But again, these things are never gone. The battle is never fully over. You just get to a certain point in which, things become easier, much easier. And so I'm at the point now where a lot of this stuff is much easier, but they still exist. These little whispers in your brain that say, that try and tell you what you do and do not deserve. And so, yeah, I would say that I'm, a little bit doing a lot better.
What helped you make that transition from letting them take over to hey, like we talked about before?
Well,
saying, yeah.
Yeah, like I said before, it was mentoring these young guys. I didn't have any mentors or anything like that my entire life. I still don't. But at this point, it's not that big a deal for me anymore. And what's helped me is there was a young guy named Ethan who kind of latched onto me as like and like there as like an older brother figure. And then after like I was doing a lot of helping him out, and like he was having struggling because of his father figure, and like the more that I helped him out, the better I felt, and I couldn't quite understand it. And I thought to myself, am I like doing this for the wrong reasons? Am I helping this person just because it makes me feel good? Or is this something that... But I realized that this is kind of a mutual benefit. So there was that started it. But what really kicked it off was the second kid who I started mentoring, because he's also half Japanese. So his mom is a lot like me, and his dad is a lot like, or his mom is a lot like my mom was, and his dad is kind of like my dad was, in a different way. And like, so, and he was like this little shut-in that like only liked to play video games and do a lot of nothing. And that's how I was when I was young too. And I started mentoring him when he was 14 years old at the behest of his mother. Which I was like a little worried about. And, like his mother is also a police officer, so she did a background check on me and all that other fun stuff. So, but, helping Cullen out was like, that was the time after doing that for a while. That's when I started to realize what was going on. That's when I started to realize that, like, even though I didn't have what I needed, helping them and giving them what they needed heals that part of me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's something that's a really important takeaway for everything, is to say to yourself, like, look, if you didn't have something growing up that you really needed in life, providing that for somebody else who needs it will heal that. It sounds weird, but it really does. And obviously I'm not talking about like, not saying like go throw, all your money at somebody. But I'm saying like, maybe cook somebody a meal or, help them out with something, listen to their problems,
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I did with all of these kids is I essentially like just told them that they need to, because your mind is loud, and this is a very important thing, and you've discovered this rather recently yourself. Training the body tames the mind.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say go and do these exercises, go and like work out, and go and take, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, go and do this, go and do that. And a lot of them would. The most recent kid that I've been mentoring, Christian started out overweight gamer. He is now a bodybuilder. I should have given you pictures of him. That's maybe weird, but anyway. But he's he is now a bodybuilder. He's training up for a competition, and
Awesome.
Yeah, so, and he's become a lot better off. He's had his own little like struggles without parents at all. So he's been, But anyway, so training the body quiets the mind. So if you are having a lot of runaway thoughts, go do something physical. Doesn't matter what it is. Take a small jog, take a walk, anything. Like, go play sports or whatever it is that you might happen to be into. Go take a martial art, go lift weights, like whatever it is. If you're, out there and like moving your body, your brain will calm down.
Yeah, I think, so go ahead.
Sorry. And when your brain is calmer, it's easier to catch things. It's easier to tell things, shut up.
Yeah, I think there's two big things that you said there that are interesting to take away. One is what you just said around calm the body, calm the mind, right? And actually, in a sense, they're kind of one and the same, right? And that's one thing that I've learned, is that we kind of treat them as separate, but it's all just your body, right?
Yeah, they're all the same thing.
And then I think the other one is around how helping others heal can heal yourself. And I wonder, is there an element there too of like learning to be compassionate to like Colin, for example, helping you learn to be compassionate towards yourself as well?
Definitely, like I said, with Cullen, like it's hard for me to. So when you're mentoring people, you're trying to keep, you have to keep a level of such separation. Okay.
Hmm.
With Cullen, that's extra hard because he reminds me so much of young me.
Hmm.
Now, his circumstances are not the same, but like a lot of his like, origin points and stuff are. And like it's so yes, helping him has helped me the most, I think, because, you know, I get to show him the compassion that my mother and father never did showed me. And like I get to tell him, when he comes to me and says, "Oh, my mom did this." I said, "Yeah, she's Japanese. Like that's how my mom was too. Like, you know, you just kind of have to accept that. Like that's how she
Hmm.
was raised. You have to understand that like, you know, anyway." But yes, most definitely, it's helped me quite a bit by helping him because, again, the people outside of you are mirrors of yourself. And this
Hmm.
is like a very important thing I think that everybody just really needs to know too is like, you know, everyone that you meet, everyone that you see, like everyone that you talk to reflects you back at you. And so, like in the case of Cullen, it really helps me, like when I'm helping him, it's a very strong reflection of me helping me. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think that's actually so beautiful that you know, I think that oftentimes when I'm struggling to be compassionate to myself, I think about how would I be compassionate to a younger version of myself, right?
Hmm.
And it's weird how we tend to be harder on ourselves than we are on other people.
Yeah, no, we definitely are harder on ourselves than we are on other people because we have this idea that we should know better.
Mm.
And again, like I said, this all of that comes from, you know, usually our parents, like, or whoever it was that raised you or whatever it was that you encountered as a child, like your um like think back to when you were a teenager. Okay? When you're a teenager, a lot of kids would say, "Oh, you don't know about this? Oh, well, you're stupid." And like that comes from their parents probably, but whatever. But like the point is that it makes this whole thing about not knowing is bad. So
Mm.
in our minds, we make up this idea that we already know. And
Mm.
some things are very obvious. Pretty much everything that I've spoken about today is very obvious. It is. But just because it's very obvious doesn't mean that it's easy to do. Because if it was easy to do, everybody'd already be doing it. So I lost track of the point again.
Yeah, no, I think what you were talking about, like why we're so hard on ourselves,
Oh
right?
yeah,
Is that,
yeah. Yeah, so we're hard on ourselves because we have that idea that we should know, that we already know. And like, so when we make a mistake, we're like, why the hell did you do that? And oftentimes we don't even realize, like, again, we're not realizing why we did these things. And the why is, this is something else I talk to the young guys about. The why is not really that important.
mm-hmm.
Why you do something, knowing why something is the way it is has never let anybody fix it. Okay?
Yeah.
Knowing how something is broken doesn't tell you how to fix it. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
You got to be able to like, so the why isn't that important, but the why is sometimes I myself I enjoy knowing why.
Mm-hmm.
But the reality is the what, and the what is what you can do about it.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to be hard on yourself for reasons that you don't always understand, but there's things that you can do about it. There's,
Mm-hmm.
as I said before, you can start out by telling yourself to shut up. You can, catching yourselves in these little moments. It's each little moment like that you catch is an opportunity to change because we're essentially programmed entities. And when you catch these little things, these little bits of code that come through, this little, what's the word I'm looking for? This protocol or whatever, this,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
little system that comes through, and you say, "Oh, hang on a second," and then you can think some way and like essentially you can say, "Oh no, this needs to shut up," or whatever. In doing so long enough over time, you can change your code. And that's how growth works. That's how healing works is, it takes time, and it's just, it all really boils down to you being able to talk to yourself.
Yeah, and I think you get into these habits of talking to yourself in a way that is not helping you grow, right? And so it's developing a different habit, and it's those moments that you're in. It's not this overnight thing that I think a lot of people want it to
Definitely
be.
not.
Yeah, it's been a big journey for you. How do you make sure that you're um staying on track with all of that?
Well, honestly, I've never really tried to keep track, but I have, like, it's all about forming habits.
Mhm.
Okay. These things they become kind of automatic. Like, I have the thought, my brain says, aha, not today, Satan. And
Mhm.
it's like, so you're just, yeah, you just get into a habit because, again, like, it's a program thing. So you need to get those things, the block of the thing that's coming in, you need to get that up,
Mhm.
and it'll knock it down a lot quicker. But I've never really, like, I think it's always important also, while we're on this topic, that, and I talk to these young guys about this, I say, look, several things to understand. This body is the only body you get, and everything is based on this body. Your brain is based on this body, your emotions are based on this body. Everything, like every piece of your life, all the connections, all of your friends, all of your family, your job, your money, everything, all has to interact with this body. So if you're not taking care of your body, you're already setting yourself up for failure. So the other thing is, on that same line, unless you're like believe in reincarnation or whatever, um, this is the only life you have. This is it. This is your chance. Like, this is your chance. And if you're not taking this time in your life to be the best possible you that you can, to find ways to heal, to find ways to better yourself, to improve, always be improving every day, because, at some point it's going to be over. And at no point when it's starting to be over, like if it's a slow over instead of a sudden over, like, are you ever going to be like, oh, well, I wish I would have sat on my ass and had a lot of money or something like that. You're never going to think that. You're going to think to yourself, man, like, I wish I would have hugged my child more, or I wish I would have, gotten over this part of me, or that, kept me from being, in closer relationships, or whatever it is. You know what I mean? Those are
Mhm.
the things that actually have value. And knowing the value of things is a skill that takes time. It's because we see things and we say, oh, that has value, but it doesn't necessarily have value. When you see something like that, things that have real value are things that, if you were on your deathbed, you would regret not having more of. That's real value. So think about that. Think about what it is that you would think, like, if you were, if doctor said, hey, tomorrow you're dead, what were the things that you would have thought that you should have done more of? The people who you should have spent more time with. Those are the things that hold the most value to you.
Mhm.
So try not to get it clouded with, other values, because, whoops, hitting the electronics. We all know what's going to happen. All right. So,
Yeah, no, I think that's uh speaks a lot to, there's a couple of things. I think one is like, I actually did a death meditation recently. I spent 20 minutes laying on the ground as a guided meditation, and just like you described, like you're there and you just died, and
mm-hmm.
what do you regret, right? For me, it was one of the big things that came up was not playing safe, was playing it safe, right?
Yes.
Another thing that came up for me, which I think you brought up, which is connecting with others. And the values that come up for people are going to be different,
Yes, they definitely
but
are.
yeah, but like you said, it's rarely ever that when that happens, the value is about something material,
Oh,
right?
of course. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm never heard anybody say, because like I said, I did used to work in a hospital. I've
Hmm.
never heard anybody, you know, in the TCU say like, oh, like, I wish I would have spent, I wish I would have had more money. I wish I would have, gotten laid more or anything like that. I've never heard anybody say that. I wish I would have had a Ferrari. Like, nobody said that. Everybody has just like always been like reaching out, and you'll see like, it's kind of dark talk, I guess, but like there'd be a lot of seeing like people who hadn't reached out to somebody in years, usually parents with their children, and now they're passing, and now they're like, oh, well, I'm trying to track down, this daughter that I've never seen or haven't seen since she was a little girl or whatever it is, you know what I mean? And some of that is brought on by guilt. It is. And that's a societal thing, and I understand that, but like a lot of it is also comes down to, like what we're talking about, like trying to better yourself, trying to like, pursue the things that you actually value.
Yeah, that's awesome. One last question before we finish. What's one piece of advice that you would give to younger Odie if you could go back in time based on everything you've learned here, which has been incredible, by the way. Thank you for sharing all of this with me and with the audience. But like, if there was one thing, if you could only go back and you had a time machine and you only had time to just give yourself one piece of advice, what would it be?
Uh, so sorry. I'm a firm believer in that things only happen the way they ever could.
Hmm.
But if I could at least say something to younger me, I would tell myself that I have value. Because young me really needed to hear that. And young me never did. But eventually, like it was, I made that for myself. And that's kind of how it works. And now I hopefully am helping other people make it for, themselves.
Yeah, that is so beautiful. And it's so true. Like people say that, you are enough, right?
Yeah.
But you don't realize it until you've experienced it.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I said, it's a struggle. Like, there's always going to be things that you regret. And life is not about living life without regret. There's no such thing. But there is like um, you know, it's at this day and at the age that you are right now, you can usually tell what you needed back then. And what you needed back then is what you should be giving to other people who need that now.
Mm.
Because that's how you get it for yourself. And I know, like I said, it seems stupid, but it really works. So,
I mean, it seems to have worked amazingly for you. And I think that's great advice. I want to thank you so much for joining me today and sharing your story. I learned a lot today. I mean, you and I go way back, but I've learned so much today that I didn't learn before, which is awesome. And, thank you to the audience for joining Odie and myself on transformational journeys. Actually, before we go, if people want to connect with you, how can they find you?
oh yeah. So I have Onmyo Productions, which is like it's I do things like personal assistant, so I help people get organized, stuff like that. But I'm also trying to do I still mentor young men. They don't have to be young men, it could be whoever really, but I'm even going to be giving a talk soon at the library, the local library, which is, kind of silly, but it's all part of the thing, handing out flyers and, trying to meet people. So yeah, you can get me at I've got Instagram, Old School Odie, where I like show people how to cook different things. Like I've got a video about how to cook a rabbit. If you've ever liked rabbit, There'll be things on there about alcohol and stuff. You can reach me through there. You could also reach me I guess at my um at my email, which is omioproductions@gmail.com.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll
You can
provide
put
the
that. Yeah, you can put that in there.
yeah, we'll put it in the description for everybody. So thank you again. So thank you for joining us on Transformational Journeys. Please show your support, hit subscribe to be notified when new episodes are aired, and we'll see you next time.